This took place several years ago when I was 18 and freshly enrolled in college. I grew up in an extremely strict household. Asian female, by the way. My parents set my curfew at 8 PM. I wasn't allowed to drive at night or go to parties, etc. All because my family was convinced that all of these situations led to rape. Anyway, you could see how once I moved out of the house, I relished any opportunity to exercise my new freedom and independence. One night at around 11 PM, I got super hungry and had a real craving for an Arby's roast beef sandwich. My roommate was tired and didn't want to go with, so I hopped in my car and decided to make a quick trip by myself. To get to Arby's, I had to take a stretch of road that was really secluded and not well lit. Of course, at that time of night, there were barely any cars on the road. At a stoplight just a few blocks from the Arby's, I was the third car waiting at the red light. Car A was in the very front, car B was behind it, and I was behind car B. There was the last car, car C, that was behind me. All of a sudden, I guess he must have thought the light turned, but it was still red. The car in front of me stepped on the gas and lurched forward, tapping the back of the car in front of him. The two drivers immediately got out and started looking at the damage. Neither of them were hurt, and there was little to no damage that I could see made by either car. I had no idea what to do in that situation. Again, I was a dumb 18-year-old just ejected into the adult world, and I had never witnessed an accident of any kind before. Was I supposed to stick around as a witness or something? I wasn't sure, but I felt very uneasy about the idea of getting out of the car in the middle of the night, on a really isolated road to talk to these two guys, especially when I didn't think they needed my intervention at all. Again, it was a super minor fender bender, and they were talking about it civilly, though they didn't move their cars. So, when the light turned green, I decided to just move over onto the other lane and proceed on my way. Again, this may have been the wrong thing to do, but I didn't know any better. The car that had been behind me did not like the idea that I was trying to leave. To this day, I have no idea what they were thinking. At the time, I thought they must have thought that I caused the accident or something. Anyway, as I shifted over to the other lane to leave, they started blasting their horn at me. I got super scared and proceeded down the road past the green light, and the car C, the one behind me, took off after me. What ensued was still the most terrifying experience I've ever had. The car, which I could dimly see had two male figures in the front seats, followed me closely for a while, occasionally blasting their horn aggressively. They would speed up until they were just about to hit the back of my car. I was starting to get really freaked out, so I started making random turns to lose them, or to see if they were really following me. They definitely were. I made 3 left turns, and they were still on my tail. Eventually, the car pulled over into the lane beside me and kept speeding up and nudging into my lane, as if to cut me off or run me off the road. I was actually crying now, and then I called my then boyfriend, telling him what was happening. I initially wanted to drive to his house, but then I realized I didn't want these psychos knowing where he lived. I tried to avoid making eye contact with the 2 men in the car beside me, and tried not to let them intimidate me off the road. They kept blaring the horn, and then eventually the driver rolled down the window. I was too scared to talk to him, but I could hear what he screamed clearly through my window, which had a slight gap in the top that never sealed up. "We're gonna catch you, bitch. I'm gonna rape your dumb ass." I think the guy next to him said something like, "Don't slow down" or something, but I couldn't hear it as clearly over the rushing of the wind and the sounds of our cars accelerating. My boyfriend heard them shouting from over the phone and directed me to the nearest police station, which was about 8 minutes away from where I was. It was actually hard for him to find the police station, or to give me directions to it because I had no idea where I was. The 2 guys kept shouting things at me, but I don't know what else was said because I was too busy blubbering to my boyfriend. Maybe. It's really hard to remember what went on in those moments, physically. I was speeding so fast to try to get away from these guys at this point that I was hoping a cop car would stop me. There are no cars on any of the roads we went down, and it just made everything worse and worse. And then, my phone battery decided it was time to die. I seriously thought I was in one of the horror stories my parents had always told me about. Eventually, I finally saw the police station my boyfriend had given me directions to, almost drove past it, and turned into the parking lot. The car followed me and the passenger door actually opened before the car even stopped. But then, I think they noticed where they were and they drove out of there, fast. I sat in my car, too terrified to get out of it because I thought moving would provoke them into coming back. Literally 60 seconds later, my boyfriend pulled into the parking lot next to my car and climbed out with a baseball bat. He held me for a little, and then a cop who was pulling into the lot approached us and asked us if everything was okay. It turns out that the car that had tailed me fit the description of a car that had apparently scared a girl so badly that she crashed her car into a tree in a divider to try and get away from these guys. Neither she or I got a license plate though, and to this day, I don't know if they ever caught those guys. I don't know what kind of human being gets their kicks out of terrorizing female drivers late at night on the road, but whoever they were, fuck those guys. I hope someone somewhere managed to put a stop to them. This happened to me a few weeks ago. A little backstory. I'm currently in college about an hour away from my hometown's parents' house. Every other weekend or so, I drive home to spend time with my parents. I then leave at around 8 to 9 PM on Sunday nights to come back to my apartment. By that time, the sun is set and it's completely dark out. My parents live in a very rural area of Ohio where there are fields for miles and little to no traffic at night. One particular Sunday, I was driving back to my apartment like usual. It was around 8:30 PM. I'm about 25 minutes into my 1-hour drive. It's dark out and I haven't seen a single car the whole ride. I drive through this tiny town with only one stoplight as I make my way to the interstate. As I reach the edge of this town into more country roads, a red beat-up car cuts me off by pulling out in front of me. Obviously, I'm pissed. There are no other cars around. The guy could have easily waited for me to pass. I get over it quickly because my favorite song at the time comes with the radio and I start singing along. I began to notice that the car in front of me is only going about 45 miles an hour. The speed limit is 65, so it's a bit ridiculous. I look for ways to pass him, but an intersection is coming up. I decide to wait and see if he goes a different direction than me. It's a four-way intersection, pitch black with no one else around. As we come closer to it, the car in front of me switches on its hazards and stops in the middle of the road. I slow down so I don't hit him. I see the driver's side window roll down and an arm wave at me as if to call me over for help. Now, I'm a very paranoid person, so I refuse to stop for someone I don't know in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere. I quickly maneuver around the car and make my right turn at the intersection, leaving the car behind. I look in my rearview mirror and see the car switch off its hazards immediately and gun it out of there. Another car comes out of the driveway near the intersection and follows it. Remember, there was no one else on the road with us for miles. I can only assume the two cars were together trying to get me to pull over and do God knows what with me. To this day, I don't drive that late home anymore. This took place about 6 months ago now, I think. In order for this story to make sense, I have to explain a little bit about my apartment. I live in an old house that was renovated and divided into 3 apartments. One basement suite, one on the main floor, and one in the attic. I live in the attic apartment with my boyfriend. The entrance to the attic apartment is rather difficult to find, and either my boyfriend or I often have to go out and collect our pizza from confused delivery guys, because even with our instructions, they can't figure out how to get to us. In order to get to our place, you would have to squeeze through the narrow space in between the 2 cars parked in the house's driveway, stumble over some uneven stepping stones and long grass, open the gate, go down the path, and then, to your right, you would find a tall set of wooden stairs leading up the side of the house to our attic door at the top. Now, I used to get home from work around 9:30 PM, so it was around this time when I came home this one night, went through the gate, and was just about at the stairs when I stopped dead. There was a man sprawled out on his front across the bottom of the stairs, apparently asleep or passed out. He was laying vertically and had one arm stretched up above his head like he was reaching out. It looked really creepy. His head was down so I couldn't see his face. I was instantly freaked out. I had never seen this guy in my life, and I had no idea how he'd stumbled his way to our stairs in the first place, in the dark and presumably drunk. My only logical assumption at this point was that he was passed out drunk. He didn't seem to be hurt though, didn't have a scratch on him, and his clothes were perfectly clean. I could see that he was breathing, which was a plus, right? But his body was blocking the stairs, and there was no way I would get to the apartment without risking waking him up, and I just got an incredibly bad feeling at the thought of trying to walk past him. I was too scared to touch him or to try and wake him up. I just had that bad gut feeling in spades, so I just quietly backed away, went back to the front of the house and phoned my boyfriend Tim. Thankfully, he answered. I asked him if he was home, and then I told him about the guy on the steps. Tim must have thought I was joking or something. He told me there couldn't be a guy on our steps because he had just come home literally minutes before, and there had been nobody there, or any sign of anyone. He also hadn't heard any noises or anything from outside. From inside our apartment, we can always hear someone coming up the steps, and we can usually hear the gate shut too. So, one would assume the sound of a large, muscular, drunk man stumbling through the gate, then falling face on our steps would have made some noise. Apparently not. I insisted that there was seriously a guy sprawled out on the stairs, and I was too scared to try to go around him. After opening the door and looking out, Tim could see I was entirely correct. Not sure what else to do, Tim called the police. Just a non-emergency line, not 911, as we didn't think it warranted that. I stood in front of the house while we waited for the cops. For some reason, they ended up sending a cop car, an ambulance, a fire truck, all with sirens blaring, even though we hadn't reported it as an emergency. The paramedics were the first on the scene, so I directed them to the side of the house where the guy was, and I came around to watch. Although he hadn't moved through the deafening noise of the sirens, he seemed to wake up fairly quickly when the paramedics shook him. He stood up on his own, steadily, and didn't appear to be impaired. At this point, the paramedics asked me to go back around the front, out of earshot, as they asked the man questions. When I went back to the front of the house, there was a blonde woman standing in the driveway watching the commotion. She asked me what was going on, and I explained it to her. I said I felt awkward to have caused so much drama by calling the police, but we just couldn't think of anything else to do, and we had a bad feeling about the whole thing. She immediately reassured me that I had done the right thing, saying, "Oh no, he had to go." She then told me that she was the neighbor, and the guy had been lurking around her property earlier. She said she had chased him away, but he had come back until her dad, the property owner, had come and told him to leave. So, I have no idea why he was creeping around our two houses, or how he wound up passed out on our steps. Either the cops or the paramedics took the guy away quietly, and we never found out anything more about the situation, but it really creeped us out. This is most likely just extreme paranoia, but I really got the feeling he was just waiting for me to get too close to him. There was something almost staged about the way he was positioned on the stairs. It gives me shivers just remembering it. This happened in 2014. At the time, my son was about 1 and I decided to take him to the park. I took him to the Humboldt Park. And if you aren't familiar with it, there are several playgrounds. I decided to take him to the playground right next to a busy street. So, on one side of the playground is the busy street, and on the other side is a small street that goes throughout the whole park. We get there and everything is fine, though we are the only people there. My son couldn't walk much yet, so I was just kind of sitting with him while he played with the wood chips. I looked up and saw a white van parked right by the entrance I used to the playground. It is parked on the little street though, not the busy one. It was kind of strange. I didn't even hear it approach. Just 1 minute there is nothing there, and the next, there is a van there. I noticed the man sitting alone in the driver's seat with the car running, and he is just staring at me and my son. I also noticed that there are no windows on the side of the van, and later on I noticed that the windows in the back were painted over. It looked kind of like a work van. I tried to ignore him and play with my son, but every time I would peek out of the corner of my eye, he is just watching us. It is starting to creep me out since I have nothing to defend myself, and I am scared he might try to take my son. I discreetly pull out my phone while facing away from him and decide to call my mother and ask her what I should do. I decided at least if he tries anything, she knows where I am, and I gave her a description of the van. While I'm giving her the description of the van, I turned so I could get a good look at him, and maybe even get his license plates just in case. As soon as he sees me on the phone, he speeds off with his tires screeching as he accelerated so fast. I was speechless to say the least. I decided not to walk home, just in case he followed me. There is another playground deeper in the park that I can see from where I'm standing, and I see people and kids playing there. So I picked my son up and walked as fast as I could to the playground, with my eyes scanning everything that moves. I got there and tell a very nice couple playing with their kids what happened, as I was pretty shaken up. They talked with me for a while and calmed me down, and said they would leave the park when I left so we could keep an eye for the guy. We didn't see him. Shortly after this, a man tried to kidnap a girl in Humboldt Park, but she got away. I've tried to find the article but have had no luck so far. I'm not sure if it's related or not, but it's one hell of a coincidence. For a while, I didn't return to the park. I'm so afraid this man would show up again. He was obviously up to no good. But the thing that scares me the most is, was he after me, my son, or both? I went to the mall with my significant other one spring evening. It was a crappy mall that hadn't been updated since probably '92, in an area that's in a slow decline. It was an indoor mall, but had several stores with outside facing entrances as well. So, sort of a mix between a strip mall and an indoor mall. My significant other just needed to run in to return a pair of pants. So, since it was a nice day, I elected to stay in the car and enjoy the evening breeze with the windows down. He said it would be 10 minutes, and ran in. As a woman, I always try to stay aware of my surroundings, so even while relaxing in the car, I occasionally scan around the area around me. While I waited, I was browsing the internet on my phone and just killing time. I was people watching a little bit too. So, I did see this older, sloppy dressed man just kinda standing in the corner of the mall, not near any store entrances. I would glance at him every few minutes, and then return to Brownie on my phone. The sun was just lowering in the sky, but it was still pretty light out. I had all of the windows down, enjoying the breeze, and the SUV was parked in the first spot in the parking lot, with a long row of cars along after. It was like a Walmart or a Target parking lot. Anyway, there I say, waiting, when suddenly the guy hanging by the corner of the mall starts in a full sprint towards me. My adrenaline kicked in immediately. I pushed the buttons to roll the windows up and put my phone under my thigh, and I just stared at him. It was totally a test of who would win, the window or him. Just as he got within 5 feet of the truck, the windows were up. He just kinda stopped, looked at me, and walked past into the lot. It took my body a full 10 minutes to calm down. I'm pretty sure he planned to snatch my phone, since I was sort of looking at it obviously, and had just gotten the iPhone 6, which was new at the time. I used to work as an elementary school after-school program in the town I went to college in. The school was known for the type of population it had. Most of the families were low income, many with gang affiliations. The kids were wonderful for the most part, but the surrounding area was awful. We had a good relationship with the police in the town, and we would immediately get a call from them if there were any Amber Lights or known buddies on the loose near us. One day, we were playing on the basketball courts. A white van with blacked out windows pulled up down the street. It was pretty beat up, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Most cars that lined the streets were ratty anyway. I continued playing with the kids until it was time to go inside for a snack. As we were walking in, one of the kids thought it would be cool to kick the ball as high as he could. The ball flew up high and landed in the streets near the van. I escorted the kids inside and went back for the ball. As I headed back, 2 of the kids from the school were walking home. As they passed the van, it shook a bit. I called out to them to say hello and to enjoy their evening. I went to grab the ball and saw a man jump back in the van. I grabbed the ball and looked up. He was staring right at me. I ran over to the girls and walked them the rest of the way home. I snuck a peek at the license plate as the van sped off. I returned to the school after ensuring the girls got home safe. As I walked in the door, the lady in charge of the program was getting off the phone with the police. They told us to go into lockdown. A man was spotted in the area in a white van. He was suspected of kidnapping and murdering 3 children in the country. The description matched the man I saw. The van matched. The license plate matched. I immediately called the police back and told them that he was here. They searched for him, but never found him. This story goes back a few years ago when I was a 17-year-old high school student. Every day, I'd walk the 25 or 30-minute journey to and from school. There was a shortcut that I would take home that took some time off the walk, and as a nature lover, the shortcut was very enjoyable. Whenever I'd walk home alone, I would take this shortcut to enjoy the small amount of forest we have in the medium-sized, moderately busy city I live in. My shortcut was pretty well travelled, and I would occasionally see other people walking from their neighbourhood towards the busy streets close by, or other students walking home from my high school or other college. Sometimes, there would be no one but me on the path. To give you an idea, the path definitely was not groomed, but it was travel enough you could make out a path from being trampled on over the years. The shortcut started off from the busy road by my high school and went into a low-lying open wooded area with small ponds. I would then veer right up the big hill towards the street parallel to my street. One day, I was walking home from school after staying a bit late for extra help. A few minutes into my shortcut, I noticed a guy standing off the main path a bit, seemingly minding his own business and talking on a cell phone. There was an open backpack sitting on the ground by his feet. This wasn't unusual by any means, since the entire low-lying area is travelled and there are numerous parts of the main path leading different directions, since it isn't a thick forest, sort of like a free-for-all for walking. Sometimes people would stand off the busy road while waiting for the bus stop close by, not wanting to stand in all the traffic fumes while people sped by during rush hour. The only thing I took caution of was that I had been seeing him there a few times that week and had never seen him before. But oh well, maybe he was a college student or just moved into the area. This time walking on the shortcut felt different though, possibly because there was no one else on the path today. But I started to get this bad feeling in my stomach, the one everyone has had a hard time describing but most people know too well. Something was not right. I was already well along my shortcut though, and I decided to blame my feelings on me being paranoid, which is not uncommon of me. I then kept an eye on him out of my peripheral vision walking by, and he continued to talk on his cell phone and didn't seem suspicious, so I continued on my merry way. I must have walked 20 or 25 meters away from the guy when he stopped talking on the cell phone, and I felt an even bigger feeling of dread in my gut. I turned around to see him crouched over, phone gone, fidgeting around with some sort of cloth and a brown glass bottle. Before I had a second to register what the fuck he was doing, his head shoots up in my direction, and the look in his eyes is a terrifying mix between, I have been caught, and I am not stopping now. He drops everything, leaving his shit behind, and starts sprinting straight for me, cloth in hand. At this point, I am too far away from the busy road for anyone to see me in the low-lying woodland with this crazy fuck, and I'm too far away to scream bloody murder. My first instinct in that split-second decision is to run towards my neighbourhood. I decided this all as I turned around, throwing my heavy backpack on the ground and sprinting as fast as I could, starting up the hill towards my neighbourhood. Judging by appearance, this guy looked like he could break me in two with no effort, and I trusted my flight response more than my fight response. Plus, I didn't know what the fuck he had in his hand. All throughout school, I had been the top cross-country and track runner in my entire school, out of the female and male teams. My running had been my saviour on a few other let's not me worthy occasions, but soon into the chase I knew it wouldn't be enough this time. This guy was fucking fast as shit, and I could tell he was slowly gaining on me without even looking back. I finally see some fenced-in backyards up ahead, and hoping people are home from work, I start trying to scream help as much as I could with my out-of-breath and useless voice. I make a split decision to start jumping fences of people's yards, hoping this guy's hurdling skills are shittier than his running. The first fence throws him off, but by the second into the next yard, he's on my ass and I feel him come insanely close to grabbing my leg. I'm shitting myself at this point. I see no cars in driveways, no sign of anyone home, and the only thing that's keeping me from panicking and wiping out in my exhausted state is thinking that I may never see my family or friends again. The next yard belongs to people I know rather well, including their dog. A bit of necessary background interruption. This house was close to my street on the street parallel to mine, and I have come to know their dog rather well since they moved in recently. My friend hated the shortcut, and sometimes I would walk to school with her on the street down the hill to the busy street. This dog was huge and an absolute maniac, and usually when kids were walking to school they would put him in the backyard instead of the front yard, since he would growl and scare the shit out of the kids walking by while he was tied outside. I love animals, so every time I walk by, I'll talk calmly to him through his menacing "I'll fuck you up" barks. Every time he'd be slightly less vicious to me, until one day the nice people who lived there gave me a treat to give him, and after that, the dog was a nice stop on the way to school. The dog's name is Leo. With the next yard and my newly acquired friend in sight, I had never felt hope like I did in that moment. By some insane stroke of luck, they let him out in their backyard for the afternoon while they were at work. When Leo saw me frantically running toward him, he started wagging his tail, then looked to the guy chasing close behind me, and started growling. I thought this would be enough to get the guy to fuck off, but no. He started to jump over the fence the second I did, but the dog jumped up and his teeth came so close to his face that the creep fell backwards into the other yard straight on his ass, as I fell into the dog's yard on my ass. The creep and I stared at each other, out of breath, for a few seconds, while the dog was barking and jumping like mad at the fence at him. Maybe he was assessing if he could take on Leo or not. I prayed the creep didn't have a knife or something. The guy looked angrier than I've ever seen a person, and after a few seconds got up and started running back down the hill from where we came. I sat there for a few seconds in complete shock and couldn't move, until my hero started licking my face. I snapped out of it and ran to the back door and started pounding. They obviously weren't home, or else they would have probably heard what just went down. My house was close, so I jumped the fence and ran the rest of the way home and called the cops to investigate and try to find the guy. I gave them the best description I could, coming practically face to face with the guy. The dude's bag was gone, and so was every trace of him. They found my poor backpack in a muddy puddle, and the police told me they'd keep looking. I never saw the guy, and didn't hear anything about it, and after calling the police a few times, I gave up. They told me during that time they'd received sketchy reports, people being stalked, chased, etc., but nothing like mine over the past few months, and there were a few missing person cases. But in a city like the one that I live in, not the worst but not the best, you can never connect anything like that for sure. The more I thought about it over the years, the more fucked up it is, and the more confused I am. First, if he was trying to kidnap me, why didn't he think of a better way to grab and snatch me into the forest before I had the chance to get away, or before another trailgoer possibly walked by? He didn't appear to have a weapon on him or anything except that creepy cloth. And what the hell did he have in his hand? A friend thought it may have been chloroform, but I did research on it, and apparently it's more a myth that pouring it on a rag and covering a person's face causes them to faint very quickly. Plus, where the hell would you get it anyway? Thanks to that asshole, I never walk the shortcut anymore without at least 2 friends, and pepper spray for some sort of protection. So, sex trade kidnapper, amateur stalker, serial killer, or whatever the fuck you are, let's never ever meet again. Also, Leo got lots of extra lovings whenever I saw him after this incident.